and welcome to Unbox the Podcast. In this series in 2025, we're going to talk about the power of your story, rewriting your own narrative to create an abundant 2025. So, welcome to the power of your story. In today's episode, we're going to dive into the lessons that nature can teach us about healing, resilience, and growth. I want to share a personal story with you, one about trees, a fig tree and an olive tree, which were planted by my parents years ago. These trees were more than just plants in our garden. They were symbols of continuity, growth, and stability. They were also a way of communicating with the community, as we always shared the fruits from the trees. But when my parents passed away, something remarkable happened. The trees stopped bearing fruit. It felt like the barrenness reflected my own emotional state. I was grieving, and in many ways I felt stuck, unable to move forward. But as we began to tend to the trees, I discovered profound lessons about life and healing. So in this episode, we're going to explore how nature mirrors our inner lives and how its quiet wisdom can inspire us to grow even in times of stillness or grief. The story of the trees. Let me start by talking to you about the family home where the trees stood. The fig tree grew tall and wide. Its branches were heavy, and the fruit each season would be enough to feed the whole community around us. The olive tree stood steady and tall. It offered the olives each season, the oil, pressing the olives to generate the olive oil, and also it gave us a sense of peace. When my parents passed away, the house became really quiet, desolate, emptier. The trees were so full of life before, they stopped producing. At first, I thought little of it. The gardener pointed out that this year there are no fruits. But over time, I couldn't help but notice the connection. Just as I was grieving and feeling stagnant, so were these trees. They felt the passing away of family members, especially the ones who planted them, and they showed their own grief by stopping their natural process, which is to grow and to yield fruits. Years passed and their stillness remained. However, we continued to take action to nurture them, water them regularly, pruning the branches. The fig tree actually died completely, which made me really, really sad. And then suddenly, some parts of it started to grow again right next to the old tree. Just the roots shot up with a new branch. And then a few years later, here it was, producing fruit again. It wasn't a quick process, but eventually the fig tree began to bloom again, and the olive tree began to produce olives again. This process of nurturing the tree mirrored my own healing journey. As I cared for them, as we all cared for them, actually, I began to feel more connected, more alive. Both of my parents loved gardening and loved pruning and looking after the trees, and whenever I was visiting our family home, I tried to do the same in honor of their memory, in honor of the memories that we all shared indeed. These trees taught me that healing takes time, care, and patience. What about nature as a mirror? Our external environment often reflects what's happening inside us. Think about how a cluttered space might mirror a cluttered mind, or might mirror holding on to the past, holding on to previous possessions that are reflected or held in memories, items, photographs, paper. And also think about how we feel lighter and more expansive when we're surrounded by nature. The fig tree and the olive tree became mirrors of our grief, my own, and eventually my renewal. Here are some key lessons I learned from the trees. 1. Healing takes time and care. Just as trees needed consistent watering, pruning, so did my emotional wounds needed attention. Healing is not something we can rush. It requires small, deliberate acts of care. Number 2, resilience is in your roots. Even when the trees appeared lifeless, their roots remained strong. Similarly, no matter how barren or still you may feel, your inner strength is always there, waiting to be nurtured, waiting to be reawakened. 3, growth comes in cycles. Nature moves in seasons: growth, dormancy, renewal. And so do we, in many ways. There will be times in your life when it feels like nothing is happening. But that doesn't mean growth is not occurring beneath the surface. The trees reminded me to embrace these cycles and trust the process. But how do you apply these lessons from nature? Well, 3 tips. 1, observe your environment. Spend time in nature and notice what resonates with you. For example, if you see a tree shedding its leaves reflect on what you might need to let go of in your life. 2, create a ritual of care. Choose one small way to nurture yourself each day, whether it's journaling, meditating, or simply drinking a glass of water with intention. Infuse that intention with the water you're about to drink. Just as the trees needed consistent care, so does your emotional well-being. Number 3, embrace the seasons of your life. Reflect on what season you are in right now. Are you in the season of growth, rest, or letting go? Whatever it is, honor it, acknowledge it, go through it, because you will come out brighter and lighter at the end of that journey. Trust that each season has its purpose, and growth will continue in its own time when you're ready, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Let me give you an example of a client of mine who once described feeling stuck as if she was in a perpetual state of winter. She wanted to force herself into action, but we worked on embracing the seasons of stillness instead. She used that time to reflect, to rest, to prepare, and when the spring came, she was honestly ready to bloom. It is no good forcing what you want against the nature of the seasons. You will get a lot more done if you notice the ebbs and flow and you try and surf the wave rather than swim against the current. Both the fig and the olive trees taught me that life is always in motion. Even when it seems still, there is still growth underneath the surface. Healing takes time, but renewal is always possible if we're willing to nurture ourselves and trust this process of change and renewal. What about you? What in your life feels like it is in the season of stillness? And how might you begin to nurture it back to life? Think about that. Thank you for joining me on this journey today. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe. Any suggestions, leave me a comment and I'll leave my email in the description. On this final day of 2024, I wish you a wonderful, healing and abundant new year. Bye for now.